All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone. Hi. Hope you guys can hear me and see the screen. As usual, you guys have any questions for me? Okay, then that is great. Okay, so if you have no questions, right? Hope you digested all the concepts, right? So let me move on to the next topic called hibernate. Okay. So before I get there, I just explain one of the concern which raised by Suman. So the concern what she had was she was doing a web application where she has one of the table as a book. Book got an ID, name, price, and she got another one, ID, username, or some other information about the user, some personal info about the user. Now here the concern started. Every user make a purchase, or whenever a user makes a purchase, where should I hold that information? When user makes a purchase, where should I hold that information? Then the thing is, if I try to maintain here, okay, I say that, okay, hey, so and so user has tried to purchase it, and I say user ID. Now suppose book is 1, the name is A, and the price is 12. Let the user ID be 1. 1 Arun, perfect. 2 Kiran, perfect. So I said Arun purchased the book 1. If Kiran also purchases, what happens? If Kiran also purchases the book 1, then what is your solution? Will you do this way? Now, he also purchased some quantity. Arun purchased 2 pieces or 5 pieces. Kiran purchased 3 pieces. So are you not duplicating this data? Yes, we are duplicating this data. So this is not the right place to store it. This is not the right place to store it. Then we thought, why don't we store it here? Like, book ID. Alright, he purchased a book and quantity is what? 5. But he also purchased book 2. Arun, he also purchased the book 2 and the quantity is 3. Now, are we not duplicating this information? Yes. So this is also not the right place to store this information. Then what I am supposed to do? Then I'll maintain one more table called purchase, where here I maintain book ID and user ID. You have a book ID, you have a user ID, then you have the quantity. This makes sense. Alright, this makes sense. So book ID 1, purchased by user 5. Book ID 1, purchased by user. Book ID 2, purchased by user. Book ID 2, purchased by user. Now this is something which is good. I am not duplicating the data. Then this is how we thought of doing it. Then here there is a concern. The concern is how do I get the information? Means I wanna show to somebody that so and so user has purchased so and so book. I wanna show that so and so user has purchased so and so book. So there is a user, he purchased a book. So when I look at the purchase table, I get the user ID, I get the book ID. When I look at the purchase table, I get the user ID. So from the purchase table, you can say book ID 1 is bought by user ID. Book ID 1 bought by user ID 1. Book ID 1 is also bought by user ID 2. So I want to see who all the people who bought the book ID 1. I want to see who all the people bought the book 1 or book with ID 1. Then we ended up in writing a big query, a big SQL query with joining two tables. Not joining two tables. I had to join two tables, the purchase table and the user table. I had to join two tables. So somehow I could manage to write something. Okay, select what all. You want to see who all the people, right? So I say u.name, u.id, u.name, comma, b.id, or you don't need b.id, right? From user u, purchase p, where p.uid is equal to u.id. Then what will be the result? This will be the result because these are the people who bought the book 1. Oh, not only this, where p.uid equal to this and u.uid and p.bid is 1. I said, want to see who all the people bought the book with ID 1. So the people who bought the book ID 1 is these people, UID and unit. Right. Now what Suman also want to see was, what exactly she want to see this is this. Along with this, she also want to say that this person has bought book A. This is what she want to see. She want to see the book name also. Now if I want along the book name, then I need to join not two tables. I need to join what? 3 tables. I need to join 3 tables. What I need to do? I need to join 3 tables in order to accomplish the same. I will end up in joining 3 tables to accomplish the same task. So what happens? Already this is a little bit difficult for a Java programmer to write. Now in case if we have to join 3 tables, the complexity increases. I'm a expert, or maybe I'm a very good in Java programming, but I have no clue about SQL. I know a little bit of basics of SQL, like inserting a record, deleting a record, or retrieving a record from a single table. But here I have to retrieve the data from 3 tables. But since I have no experience about SQL, it will be very difficult for me to write a query which can retrieve the data from 3 tables. This is a challenging job for somebody who knows very basics of SQL. So the solution from Java end is ORM. Hey, if you want you can learn SQL and you can write a query using joins. But here what I want to do is I don't want to write a query using joins. I want to use ORM. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping, and one of the ORM is hibernate. One of the ORM is hibernate, which I'm going to discuss. There are other things available. We got one more in the market called hibernate. There are a few more things actually. Top link or something here. Even EJBs are EJB. There is something called Container Manager Persistence, which EJBs are outdated actually. No one is using now. Enterprise Java Beans. Now in this Enterprise Java Beans, there is a category called entity beans, and from this entity beans there is a category called Container Manager Persistence. They also represent ORM. Data mining, database, also MySQL. Okay. ORM overview. If you look at this, as I said, right? Enterprise Java Beans, entity beans. Top, I said hibernate. This guy has not listed IBT. IBT is also a ORM framework. Spring DAO, top link, right? So there are a lot of things, right? They all represent what? Your ORM frameworks. Okay. Now, what we're gonna learn is hibernate. Right. What we're gonna learn is hibernate. Now, this hibernate is available in two versions. Hibernate 2.5 and Hibernate 3. Now your Hibernate 3 uses annotations. Now Hibernate 2.5 uses XML5. Hibernate 2.5 uses XML5. Hibernate 3 uses annotations. Hibernate 3 uses annotations. Hibernate 3 uses annotations. Okay, Hibernate 2.5 uses XML5. So I'll be discussing only one example using one example. I'll be discussing it for 2.5, and for 3 I'll be discussing more examples. I mean more examples in the sense all different possibilities. I'll be first doing some CRUD operations, then I'll be discussing one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, and many-to-one. Then I'll be discussing SQL, Hibernate query language. So let's get started. So before that, you need to download some jar files. We need to download some jar files. So I have some jar files which I downloaded. I'm going to help you with these things. Yeah, I'll put the jar files over here. So you have jar files here. No. I'm sorry, these jar files alone won't be sufficient. Let me download them. Just give me a minute. Very simple. Not this jar file. This won't be sufficient. Okay, just give me a couple of minutes. Let me check whether I have in my other machine. Okay, then meanwhile what I do is I'll just create a project, a plain Java project I'm creating. Right. Yeah. Here is the Java project. Then I quickly create some package structure. So normally the package structure we follow, the convention is this: com dot company name dot project name dot and what exactly you want. Let's say it's domain object. Com dot company name dot project name dot domain. Domain is nothing but your data object. And here I create one more: com dot company name dot project name dot test. Okay. Then I also need some XML files here. I'll create a file and it's hibernate dot cfg dot xml. Hibernate dot cfg dot xml. Then let me take one more. There's one more XML file I need, and that's gonna be whatever the domain we're gonna take. Yeah, let's take employee only. Employee.hdm.xml. So I have two XML files and I have two packages, and give me a minute. Let me grab the jar file. Yeah. I think I found them. Let me extract it. COM stands for commercial. So there are two types of package conventions. One is open source packages and commercial packages. So when it comes to commercial, you start with COM, and when it comes to open source, you start with ORG. Yeah, I think I got the right jar files, right set of jar files. Now, what next? So let me create a domain object called, here we go, I'll just say employee, and within this I'll declare some variables, provide int id, provide string name, provide double salary, provide double salary, right click, source, getters and setters, provide source, getters and setters. Now what I'm supposed to do, I have a domain object. I have a domain object. Then how do I use this domain object? How do I use this domain object? How do I use this domain object is a big concern. So that there are two XML documents, right? So I don't want to write XML. So what I do is I just grab what I have earlier. I just grab two XML documents which I have already. And if you observe them, they are much easier. So what you are trying to do is there is something called hibernate.cfg.xml. Now in that the rootmost tag is hibernate configuration. In that the rootmost tag is hibernate configuration. You got hibernate.cfg.xml, and in that the rootmost tag is hibernate configuration. Then you have a session factory. Then child tag is a session factory, and within that you have some properties. So what is a property? Oracle.jdbc.driver.oracle driver. Then it indicates that you're going to use Oracle, the URL, the username, the password. I will discuss about the dialect later. I will discuss about the show SQL later. I'll discuss about this create also later. So line number 18 to 22 I'll explain later. Let me discuss line number 24. So you are telling that you are configuring, there is a hibernate configuration, and in that you can configure the session factory, and as a part of the session factory you specify lot of property tags, and there is a significance for every property. One property tag speaks about the driver, one property tag about the URL, other property tag about the username, other property tag about the password. Then you have something called mapping resource is employee.hdm.xml. Now what is this mapping resource? So I would like to discuss more advantages about the Hibernate. I already discussed one of the advantages of Hibernate, right? What is that? What is the drawback of your normal? Oh, DTD? Okay, that's fine. What is happening is I right click on the project. Then I say here build path, configure build path. Right click on the project, build path, configure build path. Guys, you need to understand this is a standalone project. When it is a standalone project, there will be no link folder. So you need to do build path, configure build path, add external jars, then I store the jars here. Here I have the jar files. Then I pick all the jar files. See, there is a folder called annotation. I'm ignoring the annotations folder. I'm ignoring the annotations folder. Then I'm adding the rest of the jar files here. And you need all of the jar files. You don't need MySQL connector. You don't need MySQL connector because you are connecting to Oracle. You are using Oracle database, so you don't need MySQL connector and you don't need that annotations folder. Excluding those two, you can add all the rest of the jar files. Then you can click on OK. Now, if you look at this hibernate.cfg.xml, this hibernate.cfg.xml, as in the last class I discussed, every XML file needs to be validated. Every XML file needs to be validated, or every XML file needs to check for well-formedness. I need to check for the well-formedness of the XML document. Then I told you that you can check for the well-formedness against the DDD document or XSD document. One can check for the well-formedness of the XML document against the DDD file or XSD file. And if you look at this, there is a doc type. Hibernate configuration is the rootmost stack, and where I have to validate, or where is your DDD file? Your DDD file is a public file. It's external. Now look, it is referring to some address, right? But actually, in case if it is not connected to the internet, so it won't be validating it? No. It won't search for the internet actually. We just now added many jar files, right? We added so many jar files, and one of the jar file is Hibernate 3. We added so many jar files, and one of the jar file is what? Hibernate 3. We added so many jar files, and one of the jar file is Hibernate 3. And this XML file is checked for well-formedness against the DDD document. Now, where is the DDD document? The DDD document is in the Hibernate 3 jar, which is added in the build path, Now, Hibernate configuration is a rootmost stack, and you've got a child tag called session factory. And within the session factory, you are configuring your database, what database you want to use. Then in that database, what tables you need to use, that is being mapped here. See, in the Hibernate configuration, you are configuring a session factory. Each session factory indicates a database. Now, in that database, what is the database? You are using Oracle. Now, in that database, you will have to use some tables. So, that tables are mapped in the employee.hdm.xml. Employee.hdm.xml. Now I open this employee.hdm.xml file. Now guys, observe here. If you look at this employee.hdm.xml, you have a class. Hibernate mapping is a rootmost stack. And within that you have a class tag. So com.company name dot project name dot, what is the package name there? Domain. Then you have an employee tag, and what is the table we are creating? We are mapping the object. with the table. You need to observe here. You need to understand how your Hibernate is different from JDBC. What you do in JDBC is you do the mapping in the Java program. If you take any example of a DAO, where are you mapping? Here, inside the query, inside the Java program, you have a method, and inside your method, you will be mapping your Java object with the table with the help of prepared statement. You are mapping your Java object with the table with the help of prepared statement. You are mapping it inside what? You are mapping it inside what? Java program with the help of pipette statement. You are mapping it inside Java program with the help of pipette statement while insertion. While insertion. Again you map it. Again you map it with the Java object using result set. Again you map it with Java object using result set while retrieving. So you are mapping your Java object with table while inserting. You are mapping with Java object with table while retrieving. So while retrieving a single record, you are doing a mapping. While retrieving multiple records, you do a mapping. So you do map between the data. You map Java object with the table in many occasions. You map Java object with the table on many occasions while insertion, while retrieving all. So don't you think you are spending your time on doing something which is reusable? Don't you think you are spending your time or you are wasting your time on doing a reusable thing again and again and again? So instead of mapping in a Java program, we started mapping in an XML document. Instead of mapping in a Java program, we started mapping in an XML document. Instead of mapping in a Java program, we started mapping in an XML document. You got a class tag, you got a name of the class, and you got a table it has to refer to. Then you are saying here, okay, employee. So what is the attribute name? Attribute name is ID and column name is EID. Attribute name is name, column name is e-name. Attribute name is salary, column name is e-salary, and you said not null. You can specify. You cannot have your name as null. You cannot have your name as null. And this is something, name equal to ID and column equal to ID. See, for primary key we are using a ID tag. For primary key we are using a ID tag. For rest of them we are using a property tag. For primary key you are using a ID tag. For rest of them you are using a property tag. And once you are done with the mapping of columns, you are done with the class. And once you close the class, you close the hibernate mapping. Now you have your employee.java. Now you're going to soon understand how things are easier in Hibernate. Connect system / system. Right. Here I just want to show you how it works. So here you have a test. Now in this test, right click, new. I'm creating a class with the main method. When I say here, save the record or save employee. I have something called save employee. And here I'm going to go. You guys need to understand session org.hibernate. New configuration org.hibernate.cfg.configuration .configure .build session factory .open session. So this is how you obtain the session. Then I have an employee object. I'm creating an employee object. Now let me have a parameterized constructor. Source constructor using fields. Then let me, okay, but ID is auto generated. If you look at the XML file, generator class equal to native. Okay, let's not do native. Let's say assign first. Class equal to assign. So let me have a constructor with 3 arguments. Then I'll take one more constructor. Constructor using fields. and in this constructor I am not taking ID. Then let me take one more constructor with no arguments. Constructor with no arguments, constructor with two arguments, constructor with ID as an argument, constructor with no ID as an argument. Now what I am doing is, since I said assigned, generator class equal to assigned, then what I do here is, I pass employee ID 1001, let it be Arun, then the ladder salary be. You have an employee object. Now you will be surprised to see this. Session dot save employee, and before that you need to do transaction here. I'm sorry. This transaction is also from Hibernate. Transaction session dot begin transaction, and after saving the employee, transaction dot commit. It's done, and let's check here. BESC P underscore employee. Do I have a table? No, I don't have a table here. If you can see carefully, there is no table existing. There is no table created. I didn't create a table here, but still I am trying to run a program. What happened? Inserted. There is no table existing. How come the table got created? Table was not existing, but table got created. Table got created, and also there is a record in a table. 1001 Arun and 1200. How come this is possible? Here when you are mapping that this Java object is mapped to a table called P underscore employee. And it got a columns called EID, ename, eSalary. EID, ename, eSalary. But look at the configuration file. Do you see something here? What did you specify in the tag create? So I'll tell you what is the significance of create. What happens when you write create? Table exists, drops and creates new. If the table is already existing, it will drop and create a new table. Now create table do not exist, then it creates a new one. If the table is not existing, it creates a new one. If the table exists, it drops and creates a new one. It drops and creates a new one. Then comes next. There can be other option called update. If table do not exist, creates new. So when you write update option, if table exists, modifies. If table exists, modifies table. So that's what I am going to do. I already created a table, so I change it to update now. Now here, in the place of assigned, I'll write native. So I comment this object. I create another one. Here we go. See, ID got inserted. Earlier there was only single query executed. In the previous run, only insert query was executed. But in this run, there is a select query and there is also an insert query. Now the first select query will get the value of the ID and the second query will insert it. Now if you can see, I didn't pass ID, but what it's doing, it is generating an ID as a 1. So your Hibernate has written a sequence, right, which will generate the value for you. So it is just using that sequence. It is just using that sequence. It is just using that sequence, and with the help of that sequence, it is generating the value. So when you say native here, native is one of the sequence you are using it, and that is automatically generating value for you. It is already automatically generating a value, and that value will be used as a ID. That value will be used as a ID. Is it simple or is it complicated? You see the number of lines of code you have written. Only a single line to insert a record, right? And you just written this line to obtain the connection and all the stuff. So how Hibernate has simplified the database operations for you, right? You can see this. So any questions on what I covered so far? Is it simple or difficult? Okay. If no questions, right, then I'll show you different examples. I showed you save. Let me show you delete also. Or let me show you get. Save employee. Get employee. I pick the main method. Here we go. And what do we have? How do you get it? Simple. Again, you need to get that session. Session is new configuration. Hibernate.cfg.configuration. .configure. Build session factory. Open session. Then you need a transaction. Oh, you don't need a transaction because you are not going to do save, right? You are going to retry the record. So I have a method called session.get. What type of object? Employee type object. What type of object? Employee type of object. And you need to pass one ID. You need to pass which ID, which record you need to get. I want to get 1001 record. That returns an object. I don't think so. You can directly do this. Perfect. Yeah, the get method returns an object. Then you need to typecast it. Then you can print it. What all we have? We got ID. Get ID. You get name. Get ID, get name. Get salary. Get ID, get name, get salary. That's it. See, you select query and you print it. Now why these queries are getting printed? I'm not printing the queries now. From where they are getting printed? If you go back to your XML document, you said here show SQL true. You said show SQL true. Show SQL true. That's the reason it is showing the SQL for you people. Right? So you got 1001 to get the employee record. But do you have a 1002? You don't, right? So when you don't have a 1002, why don't you run it and see what happens? You have a null pointer exception at line number 22. Right? You have a null pointer exception at line number 22. Okay? So when the record doesn't exist, it returns what? It returns null for you. What it returns? It returns null for you. Your get method, when the record doesn't exist, it is returning what? It is returning a null value for you. On that null value, when you are trying to say get ID, you have error message. Now get employee. There is another option for me. There is another option for me called load employee. Try to understand the differences between the get and the load employee. Here we go. I won't be using a get method. Instead, I'll use a load method. Load with 1001. You retrieve a record. Load with 1001. You retrieve a record. Alright. Then do 1002. You get an exception, but after what is the exception? Object not found exception. So what exactly the differences between the load method and get method is? The load method will try to create a temporary object. Load method will create a temporary object, and then whatever the data is retrieved, that will be assigned to the temporary object. So that is the reason if you see get employee, first query gets executed. Look, get employee, query gets executed, then you got the result, right? So that is the reason when you pass 1002 here in the get employee, when you pass 1002 in the get employee, you directly see a exception. You got a select query, but you see an exception because it returns null. It returns null, get method. Whereas when you do the load employee, observe, it prints ID first, then query gets executed. After printing ID, and then you say get name. When you say get name, what is happening is the moment you say load, it creates a temporary object. It creates a temporary object with a given ID. It creates temporary object with a given ID, and that gets printed. And when you try to get name, it tries to look for the object. But with the 1002, there is no ID existing. Then you see the exception there, object not found exception. You pass 1001, there also the same. First ID gets printed, then query gets executed. ID gets printed, then query gets executed. And query is successfully executed because if the object is found. If the object is not found, query executes, and if object is found, data is assigned. And if object is not found, there is no data to be assigned, so it starts throwing an exception that object not found. Any questions on this load and the get, or is it clear? Yeah, the format I can help you with, or you can also find it from the Hibernate official tutorial. Yeah, we need to write XML files, but We are not using XMLs, we use annotations. They are much simpler. Okay. Oh, then we need to combine servlets and hibernate together. The way now I'm answering Suman's question. Suman's question was, this is manually we are inserting, but how to insert from HTML? Then if you want to do it from the HTML, then there should be a HTML program, there should be a servlet program. Instead of DAO programs, instead of JDBC DAO programs, you should write your hibernate programs. So HTML, servlet and hibernate we should combine to submit it from the form. And coming to Ishita's, so we have, are we supposed to learn how to write XML files? Yes, we need to do that. There is no other option. And format downloadable, you can look at the official website of the Hibernate, or you can find a lot of tutorials and they will help you with the information how to write XML files. So any question on the load and the get? Perfect, right? That's what we are aiming at. I don't want a Java programmer to learn SQL. But it is not mandatory. It doesn't mean that your all SQL queries will be replaced by Hibernate. But still, if you want to use SQL in the Hibernate, you can do that. In the Hibernate also, we can still write SQL queries. That is allowed. We have that option. I will discuss that later. How to write SQL in Hibernate. Now, there will be a situation where Hibernate don't have a solution. There will be a situation where Hibernate don't have a solution. So you want to use your native SQL. So within the Hibernate, you can still use your SQL. That option is available. I'll help you with that option later. Yeah, I'll help you with a lot of examples. Whatever the examples I discussed, that will be more than enough, but I can still help you with the resources. Yeah, I have in my mind, Suman. I'll help you with that. Tomorrow when I try to integrate Hibernate and servlets, that is the example I thought of doing it. I will talk about that later. So, Ishita, I will talk about your question. In the next example, you're going to see whether it is associated with the database or it is not associated with the database. Those kind of stuff you can understand. So far you saw retrieving a record and inserting a record. Now why don't we see updating a record? Why don't we see updating a record here? Class. What do you want to update? I want to update salary with the main method. Guys, you just need to focus here. There's a little complexity involved, or session new configuration dot configure build session factory dot open session. Now let me have a transaction because I want to update it. Transaction begin transaction. Now let me obtain an object. Employee session dot get, or you can say get or load, whatever is fine. Employee dot class Then what is that? 1001, the record exists. You obtain a record. You are modifying the salary of him. You didn't do any update. Guys, you observe. I'm not doing any update. I just modified the salary. Then I say modify the salary. Then I say transaction dot commit. I modified the salary of the employee, but I didn't modify the table, guys. So if you okay, fine, let me do that. Session dot update employee. Now what do you see? You fetched a record, you modified the value, and you are doing the update. You are doing the update. Run this. Select query and update query. You see the select query and update query. 1001, 1800. Now you observe. I'm commenting this out. I'm not updating now. Right? Now let's see what happens. Did I run the update command? But your update query is still getting executed. Your update query is still getting executed. You will understand the reason now. Here. By default, right, before the session is closed, our transaction is committed. Every object associated with session is updated. By default, before the session is closed, the transaction is committed. Every object associated with the session is updated. So here you fetched an employee object and you modified it, but you didn't call update. But by default, update is getting called. By default, update is getting called. Now you don't modify. What happens? Only select query. So the statement I gave is incorrect. By default, before the session is closed, the transaction is committed. Every object associated with the session is updated only if it finds modified. Right? If it finds modified from database. So what do you understand from this? So I modified the salary of this employee, and this employee object is associated with the session. So before I say commit, I'm going back and check in the database whether whatever the data which is in the database is it the same as in this object. If yes, no, update query. If no, if it is modified, then update query gets executed. So your hibernate, you can consider this as a drawback, and you can also consider it as an advantage. It's a boon as well as a curse. It's a boon as well as a curse, because people may not be aware of that this object will be held by a session, and before it is committing, it's going to go back and check whether it is modified or not. If it's modified, it will reflect the changes in the database. If somebody is not aware of this, then he thinks that, oh, I didn't call update, so it won't get updated. But that's not true. I didn't call update, so it will not be updated. So that is not true. It gets updated in case if there is a modifications before you call the commit. Is this clear, or any questions on this part? I hope you understood the object association with the session. Every object which you fetch from the database is still associated with the session. If the session sees any modification on the object, then by default an update query gets executed. By default an update query gets executed. By default an update query gets executed. Now in case if you don't want your update query to function, session dot evict employee. Now you see by default your update query won't execute. By default your update query won't get executed. Why? You modified object, right? But why the update query is not getting executed? Because detached the employee from session. You detached the employee from session. So what you need to do is you need to reattach. Reattaching with session. Now in this case update query gets executed. I hope it's clear for you guys. So we saw saving, we saw retrieving, we saw updating. Then I'll discuss one more. Let me create another example. Right click new class, save or update employee. In order to demonstrate this example, I go to the XML file, mapping XML file. I change it to assign. Now observe here what I'm going to do. Session new configuration dot configure build session factory open session. See, what does this mean actually? This is a mechanism to read this XML file, hibernate.cfg.xml file. If you invoke this piece of code, new configuration.configure.build session factory, it reads this XML file and it constructs a database object with the help of the properties. So when you say new configuration.configure.build session factory, it reads the XML file hibernate.cfg.xml and it will construct what? It will construct a database object. Now again you observe here, I am creating an employee object. With 1002. I'm creating employee object with 1002 and some name and salary. Then what we do? Simple, right? Session dot, oh, we need to have a transaction. Session dot begin transaction. Session dot, I'm doing what? I'm not doing save. I'm doing save or update. And I'm passing what? Employee object. I'll tell you the significance. When you say transaction dot commit, When you say transaction.commit, oh, what's wrong? Okay, yeah. We see here, when I say transaction.commit, what is the query, what is the command? Save or update, right? When I say save or update, why it is running select query as well as insert query? So I said save or update. When I say save or update, it first checks with the given ID. It first checks whether the given ID record exists or not. It checks with the given ID record exists or not. If the record doesn't exist, it will insert. If the record doesn't exist, it will insert. If the record doesn't exist, it will insert. Now, 1001 is already existing, right? 1001 is already existing. Now I try to update it. I'm saying save or update. Now you see the change. This time it won't be the insert. This time it is select and update. Why? 1001 already exists. I hope you understood the significance of save or update. With the given ID, if the record exists, it updates. If the record doesn't exist, it will insert. Clear, or any questions on this? How do I get all the employees? You will be very happy to see this. New configuration dot configure build session factory dot open session. Now I'd like to tell you one more point. The name of the XML should be hibernate.cfg.xml, or it can be anything. The name of the XML should be hibernate.cfg.xml. For name of the XML, it should be always hibernate.cfg.xml, or it need to be different. Hibernate.cfg.xml, or it need to be different. It can be anything. It can be anything. But if you write anything, then you need to specify here. Suppose if you are writing xyz.xml, then you should specify xyz.xml here. New configuration.configure. The configure method takes a argument, the name of the XML. But if you specify hibernate.cfg.xml, you don't need to pass. If you use hibernate.cfg.xml, you don't need to pass it as an argument. If you use anything else, you need to pass it as an argument. Now, yes, for MySQL, rest of the programs will remain same. The only file which gets changes is hibernate.cfg.xml. Hibernate.cfg.xml. Then you got the username and password, and here it will be org.hibernate.dialect.mysql. Coming back to the get all employees. Query org.hibernate, query equal to session dot create query. Now here from employee, guys, you need to understand what is the table name, P underscore employee. What I'm doing here, employee. What I'm doing there, from employee. So what is this employee? Employee represents object name, I mean class name. It's not the table name. It's not table name, it's the class name, employee. So this is your HQL, hibernate query language. Hibernate query language. Then that's it. Query dot list. Your job is done. Alright. This is your create query. Now you can also have one more option here. Create SQL query. So let's start from P underscore employee. Then after this, what I'm gonna do, right? After this, what I'm gonna do? Well, I'm not sure. Let me check some options. Not this. Okay, let me try. I don't have solution earlier. I don't know where it is. Then SQL query dot list. I think what it returns is array list. List. Now you got a for loop, and you can typecast it. Object colon list. Then it becomes your normal routine thing again. You cannot enjoy the benefits of Hibernate if you use this native SQL. Employee object you can just print it. run this. Oh, okay, there is some problem here. It cannot be tasked. Yeah, you cannot typecast it to this. So I think, yeah. Mm, you have a list and okay. It's an example. Let me check. Food operations. Yeah. No. Okay, let me search for it. I think I should have here. Yeah. You have few options actually. This should work. So you are adding here. It's SQL query. You have SQL query. One SQL query is undefined for the type SQL query. Okay, so guys, I'll be working on this part later, SQL part. Okay, so just for time being, I'll discuss tomorrow. I'm not sure. So for time being, just I'm working with SQL. SQL part, I can also use native SQL in Hibernate that I'll discuss tomorrow. Let me look at those examples. Here we go. You got from employee and you got SQL, and this is how you manage the data. Now, how do we do these examples? How do we do these examples? Alright. how do we do these examples using annotations? Now I'll achieve the same kind of stuff with annotations. I'll create a new project quickly. Java project. Hibernate underscore crude underscore operation annotation. So similar stuff I'll be doing with annotation. So what I need to do is, and here I copy most of the things. When I say, I just copy this hibernate.csv.xml. I just copied hibernate.csv.xml. Then here I won't be referring the XML file mapping resource. Rather I say com dot company name dot project name dot domain dot employee. I write the class only. Then in the source I'll create packages as I did earlier. Com dot company name dot project name dot com dot company name dot project name dot domain. I'll create another one. Com dot company name dot project name dot, you got a domain, you got a test. Then in the domain I'll create a class employee. I click on the finish. Now I need to add jar files, right? Right click, build path, configure build path, add external jars, add all the jars, exclude annotation folder, then exclude MySQL connector, right? Then say open. Then again you say add external jars, open annotations folders and add this jar file. So you need to add the jars from annotations folders and you also need to add the rest of the jar files excluding the MySQL connector. Because why excluding the MySQL? Because I am using the Oracle. Now here @entity. So did we add references, right? Yeah, we did. We'll refresh it. Yeah, @entity. Then @table name equals to, what is the table name? T underscore employee. Now provide int id, provide string name, provide double salary. Right click, getters and setters. Now you guys are doing the mapping in the Java program itself. We are doing the mapping in the Java program itself. Source, constructor using fields, constructor without fields, now constructor without ID. Perfect. Now here on top of getter methods, @ID. If you want auto generated, generated value. It's a primary key. And you can also specify one more, column. What is the column name? EID. Now for the rest of the things, only column. Column name equal to rename. Column name equal to e-salary. Name equal to e-salary. It's done. Go to the test, right click, class, save employee, public static void name. There is a slight change here. You need to notice. Session is your new annotation configuration. This is annotation from Hibernate. Annotation configuration dot configured dot build session factory dot open session. Then create an employee object. You said ID generated value, right? If you don't want ID to be auto generated, you can ignore this. If you want ID as auto generated, you add this. If you don't want, you can ignore it. Then create an employee object. $1,003. Then salary. Then you need a transaction. Hibernate. Begin transaction. But before you call the commit, save the record. Session.save employee object. So com dot company name dot project name dot domain. So go to the XML file. Okay, here. So I think load it. Yeah, seems to be perfect. Dot employee. What is wrong with it? Okay, let me do this. No, still, what is this? Employee not com. Nothing resource. Com dot. Let me check it. Oh, I'm sorry. There will be an attribute change which I missed out. It will not be source. It will be class. If it is XML file, it will be source. No such field error. Annotation configuration dot save employee dot java. Open session. EID, e-name, e-salary. EID, e-name, e-salary. STARY, ENAME, EID. Yeah. E-name, e-salary, EID. SQL visual markings. No such field. Configuration save employee.java. From dot company name dot project name dot domain dot employee entity table name equal to p underscore equal to column name equal to eid name equal to name equal to salary salary. It seems to be okay. New annotation configuration dot configure dot build session factory dot open session. Mapping class. Seems everything okay. And I added all the respective jar files too. Java X persistence dot entity table ID column. Yeah, 1001, 1002. Okay. I'm passing ID here. Let's not do that because I said auto generated. No, that's not a problem. No such field error. SQL results as mapping. Save employee. With the employee workforce. Here is the field problem arising. Field underscore employee is the table name, entity name, ID generator, column name. Okay, let's wait. Let me do this stuff. Now I change. I can make the secure. Okay. You guys just give a try. Let me check what is the error problem here. You got everything is being mapped perfectly. You got a column and on top of this. Okay. Let me add one more. Or let me create a new table name. That is not a problem. Accurate column name EID and accurate column name e-name and accurate column name e-salary, and it seems to be okay. And here we go. It's annotation configuration dot configure dot build session factory dot open session, and you have a session dot open transaction. Complicated example. Okay guys, I'll just look into it and we'll try to resolve the problem in the next class. Okay. So any questions other than that? It's all good. Okay. If no questions, we would like to discuss the. I would like to stop here, and we'll catch you in the next session. And in the next session, I try to fix what is the problem here. And once done with that, I'll be discussing the topics like native SQL, mapping, and then servlet hibernate integration. These three things we will discuss tomorrow. Okay. Alright guys, if no questions, thanks everyone. Catch you in the next session then.